Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. Happy, I guess it's Friday, or whenever you're listening to this episode. This is the bonus episode for balance. So you are listening to this because you are on balance, which means, of course, I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the people that aren't on balance, but I really do appreciate those of you who utilize this platform, either if it's for workouts or recipes or blog posts. If you haven't checked out the content for March, you should definitely go and do that. There's an upper body core workout or upper body and core workout. The recipe for the month is a sheet pan supper. And then the wellness blog post is all about why should I add salt to my water? That is definitely something that has been a more recent trend. So much so that in Lincoln, Nebraska, I had a client that could not find Celtic sea salt because it was all sold out at most grocery stores. So totally bizarre, totally crazy, but at the same time, there's a reason. So read that post if you are curious or if you are wondering why on earth would I do that? That blog post will give you more information and go a little bit more in depth about that. Otherwise, I thought that we could just use today's call to catch up, but also to dive into diet culture. And I'm going to deep dive into it, not holding anything back because I've seen way too much of this. And it's something not that I wouldn't share it on my regular Nourish with Purpose podcast like platform of Apple Music and Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but there are some specific examples that I've noticed recently of people around me that not to expose them, but at the same time to just share like what I've been hearing so much of recently. Absolutely drives me bonkers, and I'm going to share a little bit more about my own relationship with food, how that's kind of evolving now, and just give you kind of a catch up on where I'm at with that in comparison to where I was even a year ago. So we're going to get into all of that, but before we do that, let's just catch up. This last week, I have been working on this project. It's a pretty big announcement, honestly. It's something that there is so much of a need for, and it's something I'm so excited to share with you. If you would like to get early access, you can know, I guess, what's going on before most if you just shoot me an email or a text or a DM, and I will get you all the details that you need to know. It is something where there are limited availability, so you might want to jump on it or at least kind of inquire about it before I announce it on Sunday if it's something that you're thinking you want to do after you, of course, learn more about it. But outside of that, I spent my Tuesday in Lincoln and worked at a coffee shop, and then my Thursday in Omaha, and actually went to, what is it called? It's like a creative studio where you can go in and you can paint your own pottery. You can do all these different crafts in Omaha with my friend Hannah, and I painted a mug. It's so darn cute. It's like a deeper sage green and then a light sage green. I did some stripes on it. And I always think when I do an art project and I don't absolutely hate what it looks like, that is such a success, because I feel like historically I would go to like a paint yourself silly or do something like that, and then I would get it back and just hated it, or it didn't match with anything else that I owned. So I'm like, we're going very simple this time. I'm doing stripes, and we are not going to go too extreme in the design. We're not going to get too intricate here. So that was really fun. I also discovered public libraries, which might sound really stupid, but Omaha, they tore down their public library because they did the whole Jane Leahy Mall stuff. If you're not from Nebraska, it's not that important to the story, I guess. But anyway, long story short, they tore down the old library and they moved it actually to a new location. And what I didn't know, I guess, about public libraries is that you don't have to pay to go there. You can use their free Wi-Fi, and you can get study rooms where you can work for up to 2 to 4 hours. And it was awesome. I always just feel like when I go into a coffee shop, you have to buy something, which is kind of how it is. Like, in order to use their restroom, their Wi-Fi, and hang out there, you kind of need to buy something. And I just don't like that guilt, and sometimes I don't always want or need a coffee. So it was really cool to utilize the public library. I did my one-on-one coaching calls while I was there, and I got so much done for what's launching on Sunday, and that just felt really good to just get it all out of my system. I feel like you can only think about things for so long before you're like, okay, I just need to do it. Like, I just need to put it out there. I need to get things going, because I am somebody who very much struggles with being extremely stressed all the time. And I don't think this is something that most people can probably tell, just because I would say I'm like very high functioning under stress. At the same time, like, I don't really ever give myself downtime to not either be thinking about work or be thinking about what I need to do. I have my hand in a lot of different things, which I love, and it really is, it's fitting to my personality, but at the same time, it's extremely overwhelming most of the time. And I am always in this state of feeling like I am never doing enough, right? I could always be doing more. And I'm also always in the state of, well, nobody cares about what I'm doing, and so why am I even doing it? And then that causes even more stress, because I've done the other job things, I've done working for other people, and I don't love it. And it's not to say that things aren't in a good place. I am just never satisfied with the goals that I set for myself, which is something that is very negative. And I know those are like my negative and my limiting beliefs. That's something I talk a lot about with clients, especially when we think about your relationship with food or your body or your situation. We have to honestly identify those limiting beliefs. And so for me to say that out loud, I'm saying a negative or limiting belief. And this is a practice actually we could probably do together if you would like. But I want you to maybe pause this podcast and write out like 3 of your negative or your limiting beliefs. So for me, I just said what they were. And then what I want you to do is to flip those negative beliefs. So flip them to be positive. And this might feel very uncomfy, because a lot of the time we don't want to openly say out loud like a positive thing about ourselves, right? I feel like, connect with people over negative things. Even, kind of on track with the diet culture stuff I'm going to talk about today. I work at a coffee shop, and there were 2 ladies buying bread, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to eat this while I'm on my recumbent bike this evening. Like, obviously implying that they would need to exercise while eating bread because the bread was so bad for them. And the other one was like, oh yeah, I totally agree. I shouldn't even be buying this. I know I'm going to eat the whole loaf, right? They were connecting over something so negative and not true, like them needing to exercise while they're eating bread is so false, and it's so diet culture minded that we can't even call each other out for it anymore, right? Like, I wanted so badly to call them out for it, because we don't need to talk like that anymore. It's not cute to talk like that. It's not cute to put yourself down and feel so negative all the time. And so that's kind of where I have to like put myself in a reality check, and I need to identify those limiting beliefs. So nobody cares about what I'm doing. Why am I even doing this? I need to flip that and say, you've worked with over 100 women in the last year. You are doing things that people care about. Maybe right now just feels like a different pace than you're comfortable with. And that is 100% true. I have worked with a lot of women this last year. I am still working with women this year. It's not like just because you've got seasons where you're really, really busy or you're not so busy, right? That's just the tendency of life. And unless you're in a job that is the same thing every single day, I need to get more comfortable sitting with myself in those seasons that feel uncomfortably slow, because I hate to be slow. I hate to be at rest, which is something I'm learning about myself, and I think I'm constantly being taught. And honestly, I think God is trying to show me, maybe by having things slow down in this season. It's because I've just had 5 seasons where I had a lot of traction. I had a lot of things happening, and I didn't even show gratitude in that season. It's like so often we have all these really good things happening for us, business related or not, but we don't show gratitude for it. So why would those good things keep happening if we're not even recognizing and appreciating them? And it makes me so frustrated with myself when I say that out loud, because it's like, why can't I be content? Like, why am I always pushing to do something new, to do something bigger, to do something better. Like, it's who I am and it's my personality. And I think it honestly keeps me working so hard to grow something. And that's a good thing, right? It's a blessing to be self-determined and self-disciplined to make things happen. But on the other hand, it can be very negative when you don't appreciate what's happening because you are so forward thinking. And so, that was my first limiting or my negative belief. My second one is that I'm chronically stressed all the time and it's never going to get better. Well, how could I flip that to be a positive? And say, maybe I'm stressed right now, but I am actively going to take the time this week to sit with myself in silence and allow myself to fully feel rested. When does that ever happen? I don't know. And I know life is only going to pick up. So if I already feel like my life is moving at 5,000 miles an hour, when I have kids, when I maybe expand my business, when I take on different opportunities, like, how am I ever going to feel like my life, like I have control over my life, if right now I'm not even capable of doing that? So I would say those are probably the two biggest things. And I share that very vulnerably because sometimes with what I do, it's really hard to admit that you are not good at doing something when it comes to your health, right? I know that me being stressed and me being busy all the time and under resting, not saying I don't get enough sleep at night, because I definitely do, but I don't take time during the day to really just slow things down and disconnect. It's hard to admit those things because it's the things that I tell other people to do. And I've come to realize that, first off, with vulnerability comes connection. And hopefully you can connect with what I'm sharing and what I'm talking about because I'm opening up to share something I don't always like to share. But secondly, if we act like things are perfect all the time, I think it makes it hard for people to... I don't know, it's almost harder then for people to feel like they know you when they think that your life is picture perfect. And so that's where like sharing all the raw and real things, like that's not fun to do. It's not fun to share that on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And I feel like I already overshare so much of my life where it's hard for me then to share everything about my life. And not saying I have to, right? I don't need to do that. There's nobody probably that cares all that much if I do that or not. But I really want people to feel like I am someone that can relate to the struggles and those maybe insecurities they have, because I am on a different journey, but it might actually look very similar. And so it's just something I'm continuously learning. But I hope that like negative and limiting belief practice is helpful for you. It's something that I really just need to sit down with myself and be better about doing, because I don't often write those things out. But I know if I wrote down all the good things that were happening around me and I gave that true gratitude for what was going on, I think my outlook on my situations would look a lot differently. And it's just a habit I need to get back into. So that was kind of a long-winded way of catching up. On a more light note, I am so excited because this actually just happened yesterday. I ran downstairs yesterday after getting home, and I was going to water all of my seedlings because I've got seeds started, and they're all sprouting. Well, not all of them, but most of them are sprouting, and I can't tell you the rush of joy that brings me. And I think that's how I know that I'm in the area that I need to be in, right? With coaching, I have those feelings too. And I think for me, gardening and growing flowers and vegetables, that's a whole different realm that I don't show a lot of and I don't talk too much about. I talk about it, don't get me wrong, but more so like on the podcast. But I just feel so much joy doing that. And it really comes down to raising my own food and having floral cuttings. Like this summer, I'm hoping to have enough flowers that people can come pick at my home. And even if that is more of like a next year plan and I don't have quite that supply, I hope to put together bouquets and then sell them at the hatchery, which is located in town near us, which is just so exciting. I know that's already something I would have the ability to do. I've already talked to them if I had the supply. So I'm just so hopeful that things turn out. And I also have Jamie from Harvest Homestead. She has her own farm, and she does those floral cuttings, the you pick, all of that. And she's awesome, and she's coming out to our farm to actually help me get things set up to how I want them to look, or how maybe logistically things should be set up to kind of expand. And I just think that that is just so cool, and I'm so excited about that. So yes, my little sprouts are growing. After I record this episode, I'm actually going to start my loaf of sourdough and some sourdough pizza crust, and then I'm going to go downstairs and plant my second round of flowers and some veggies as well. So I'm no, we're in March, aren't we? I was thinking I'm a little ahead of myself, but no, March 4 is the next round where I logistically need to be planting things for to be able to have them at the right time after the last frost and plant them. But I'm going to start it a little bit early because I just can't help it, and it makes me so happy. And my dad also built me these gardening boxes, and so I've got boxes for all my veggies, and then I have a pasture on our farm. So we live on 3.5 acres. We have a horse shed, which I'm going to actually take one of the stalls and make it kind of like a workspace for my garden where I can keep all my supplies. But then we also have chickens, and then I don't know, our farm is just spread out enough where we have this pasture where I'm doing the flowers, and I'm just really hopeful that things turn out well this year. Of course, you can tell I get very passionate about that. So very excited for those updates. Obviously, those are on a much lighter note than I guess what I would have started this podcast with, but nonetheless, I am really wanting to show the good, bad, and the ugly. And I guess in a way for me to do that is to just talk. And that's where honestly podcasting is so therapeutic. And I feel like it's made it so much easier for me to talk to just people in the real world, I guess you would say, because I mean, this is kind of like a therapy session, but it also just makes me want to know people, truly know them. And I don't know if I'm making that make a lot of sense, but when it comes to talking to people, I want to ask them different questions. And I interview people on the podcast, which I haven't done in a while, but through that, it's I learn from them. And so I want to learn from everybody around me. And so I guess kind of along with that, if you have anybody, or if you yourself are I would like to be a guest on your podcast, I'm doing some really cool things, or I feel like I could relate to the people that listen because of XYZ, please reach out to me. And don't be shy or embarrassed to shoot your shot. I think that's something that can feel very, very uncomfy. I even notice that with people, if things I post, even for example, the announcement that I have on Sunday, people want to know what's going on, but they don't want to directly talk to me. And I think sometimes there's not intimidation, but they fear if they reach out to me, I'm going to bombard them and be super salesy, which is just not me. But sometimes you kind of have to do that. If you want something, you have to message somebody and feel uncomfy and make it happen. So I guess that's just what I want you to also understand with the podcast is if you want to be on, shoot your shot, And I would love to talk to you. And I just really, with the whole purpose of doing all of this, right, this balance side of things is I wanted to give women a space to have all the resources that they needed to feel like they had, support when it comes to their health journey. But then on the other side of that, I started Nourish with Purpose because I wanted women of all ages to understand, it's okay if you don't know what you're doing. And it's okay if you are confused at this stage of life, or if you're in school, if you're a mom. I want it to be relatable to just women in general, and to be a place where you can come and listen and you don't feel like you're not doing enough. And that's where I think just being real and having real people on that are just vulnerable and open is that a huge piece of that, right? And also just that deeper understanding of your purpose is not the job you're doing. So if you don't have a cool job, or if you don't even know what job you want to do in the future, that's cool too. Your purpose is the characteristics that make up you. It's not your job. So I think that's a different way to think about it too. If you're I'm not qualified to do that, it's neither am I. We're just all here trying to live out our purpose, but it has nothing to do with your job. And for someone like me who puts so much of their identity in their job, I also have to recognize that burnout and exhaustion and fatigue and honestly just a desire to isolate myself on this farm and make bread and have mini goats and mini cows and chickens and grow veggies and have flowers. In my ideal world, that would be all my life consisted of. And that's not to say that I don't love everything else going on business-wise, personal-wise, but sometimes you just want to escape. And I think creating an environment that you don't want to escape comes when we actually just slow down and understand what we truly want. And so for me, I know I need to slow down and prevent burnout because I'm so in love with everything that I do. But how much of it is, I don't know, how much is too much to be doing, and what can I do so I can have more of a long-term route of success rather than just looking at the short term and being upset with what's happening right now and neglecting to look ahead. And so anyway, I will get off that soapbox, but I share a lot more vulnerably probably on here than I do in the other episodes. And that's because if you're around and you're listening to this, hopefully it means that you are just obviously a good person. I think we attract each other, right? We are friends and we know each other for a reason, and I just hope that you can find some relatability in today's episode, especially this beginning part, because I know it's been kind of a lot to just throw at you, but at the same time, I want to be real with where I'm at, and for you to know I'm always a work in progress too. So, okay, let's get into the bulk of today's episode. It's probably not going to be too long, but I say that every time, and then it ends up being over an hour of me rambling about some hot topic. So I won't say it's not going to be a longer episode today, but I really just want to talk about my relationship with food, because this is something I've dove into some, but it's something I don't actively talk about all the time. And so that was what I just felt really called to talk about today. So I wanted to start at kind of the beginning of where I started struggling with my physical appearance. So I remember when I was, probably 5, and my mom and I would go for walks. And I remember there's this phrase that she had said, and she's like, just think of how good we're going to look when we walk, every day all summer. And this is not a diss on my mom in any sense. She has been one of the most supportive people in my entire life. So this is not saying that this was something that she did intentionally, but I just remember thinking oh gosh, yeah, I do have kind of stomach rolls. And it's something I would have identified on myself anyway. I had those hips that were a little bit chubby, right? And I always just never liked that. And I remember going up to a mirror and holding my hands over my sides. And I was probably, 5, 6, 7, old enough to, I guess, understand, ooh, I don't like how I look, but I was young enough that, it should have never honestly even been a concern in the first place. I know it was around, that first grade time frame. And so I looked in the mirror and I put my hands on my hips and I was like, oh yeah, I would look so good if I didn't have those little love handles. Another point that I can kind of think back to was when I was in first grade. I had a friend and she had the skinniest little legs, and my legs have always been a little meaty, right? And that's not I'm not upset about that. For a while I hated my legs, but really it's just something I've always had. I've always just had legs, and I think I developed really quickly, so that's also probably a piece of this. But I remember sitting on my knees next to her, and her legs were about the size of my arms, and I felt so self-conscious. I remember putting my hands over my legs and thinking, man, if my legs were this skinny, I would look so good. And it's kind of just things like that popped up all throughout elementary. And then I think about 5th grade. I really hated my belly button for some reason, which fast forward, I got a belly button ring in college. So obviously that kind of healed itself, which I don't have anymore because that was just a phase for me. But I remember I hated how my belly button looked in shirts because I had a little bit of a lower pooch, maybe I don't know, like right in my belly button area. It stuck out a little bit more. So I remember wearing like 2 or 3 tank tops under a shirt just so you couldn't see my belly button. And I remember having a couple friends just say, wow, you look really big today. Like it, and they weren't saying it. Again, I was very sensitive because I was already self-conscious, but they weren't saying it because they were bullying me in any way. It was just like, you don't look as like, your body looks like bigger today. And that's because I was wearing 3 tank tops underneath a t-shirt so they wouldn't see the outline of my belly button. Like the things that come to your mind, and I think this is where for the little girls that I see in elementary, for me to think about them hating how they look in first grade, like I can't even fathom that. And that's where I hope and I pray, honestly, that when I have a daughter, hopefully if I have a daughter, that I'm able to change that narrative for her, because I think so much of that is hereditary. And I think our mindset around our bodies and our beliefs around our bodies and food come from not even saying our parents, but our grandparents and their parents. Like it all stemmed from somewhere. And psychologically, I also know like the mindset that your mom had when you were in her womb is often the mindset that is translated to the fetus as they develop. And again, that's where, okay, well, think about if your mom's mom had the same thoughts when she was in her stomach. Like that's where that psychological piece, like you can't avoid the mindset. Like that cannot be avoided, especially when it comes to dieting. You cannot ignore the mindset, because that is 98% of, and that I just obviously made that percentage up, but a huge percentage of why you handle food the way you do, why you think about food the way you do, is because of somebody before you or because of somebody around you that greatly influenced your relationship with food. And so as I think back to that, okay, so that's 5th grade. Then I think about 7th grade, and I really slimmed down because I started playing sports. My body was just developing and changing. I was very thin, I would say, in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, I gained weight again. So you go from 7th grade, very thin, and then I remember getting a dance costume, and they measured me the summer before going into 8th grade. And then by April of my 8th grade year, I could not really fit in that costume. Like it was way too tight. It was uncomfortable. The shorts were way too short, and it's because my body changed. And I think it's just admitting that is kind of hard too when you're that young, of like, oh, why did I gain so much weight? Well, I know why, because I would snack mostly when people weren't around. And I noticed that habit then show up again when I was in college. And this is something I honestly don't think I've ever talked about, because there's so many factors in college that you can blame weight gain on. Because in high school, I remember I would do, during track season or basketball season, I would do like protein shakes for lunch. And then I would eat late at night, right? As most kids in sports, and especially with basketball, do. Like after you play a game, it's like 8 o'clock at night. I would eat pizza. I would eat everything. And I noticed I didn't feel good. Like there were foods that didn't make me feel good, but I didn't know what they were. I just knew I didn't feel good if I ate these certain foods. So fast forward to freshman year of college, I gained 35 pounds. I didn't gain 35 pounds. I gained 25 pounds-ish. I lost then 35, but that's way forward thinking. So, and that's, the number isn't, excuse me, the number isn't the thing that I want to emphasize there, but I just want you to have an idea. Like, it wasn't like, oh yeah, you gained a little bit of weight. Like, no, I gained a fairly significant amount of weight my freshman year of college, but it didn't happen until the second semester, my freshman year of college. And that is when my roommate moved out, my freshman year roommate, and I started partying a little bit more probably. And just, that was how my friends and I socialized. It was where the people that I wanted to see were. And then because I was living by myself, I could buy food, I could store it in my room. And then if I was hungry late at night, like, my food was 2 feet from my bed. So I got these trail mixes from Target, and I would just eat them because it's almost hard to stop eating them. Well, it all contained dairy. Obviously, now that I reflect back and know I'm lactose intolerant, there's a reason that my body was puffy and swollen and why I didn't feel good, why I was bloated. And when I think about how my clothes started fitting, I was so unhappy with myself for that, right? So yeah, maybe you're drinking and you hadn't ever drank before and you're going to gain a little weight. But then I was eating food in the cafeteria and then I was snacking because I didn't like the food in the cafeteria, but my snacks were terrible. They weren't good options. And I just had no understanding of how I should be nourishing my body. And so my clothes, like they were just so tight. And I remember going shopping again for clothes that were bigger. And my parents, they always say like, well, I didn't notice anything. I think people noticed. I mean, I don't know, even if I look back at photos, just how round my face was. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm body shaming that version of myself, but as somebody who's always been active, who's always really cared about my physical appearance. And if we even think back to like the mindset piece of being a first grader and comparing your body to somebody who is so much skinnier, like that had always been on the forefront of my mind, is the skinnier you are, the better you're going to look. I didn't care how I felt necessarily. The skinnier you are, the better you're going to look. And so then when you gain weight, it's like a total shock to your system because you're like, well, this is so out of the blue. I wasn't expecting this. I didn't want this to happen when I went to college, but it did. So then that sophomore year, or kind of that summer after my freshman year of college, I really, really started dieting. And this is where the dieting piece comes in because I would say it was restriction. I would do like maybe some Special K cereal in the morning. This is actually exactly what I ate. Special K cereal for breakfast in the morning with almond milk. Later finding out I'm sensitive to almonds, but that's besides the point. Almond milk. And then for lunch, I would be working at the swimming pool. So I was in a bikini. So if you gain, like for me, I'm so uncomfy and my swimsuits from last year don't fit the same. And I just hated being in a bikini, but it was what it was. So then I would do like a 90 calorie light fit Greek yogurt, contains dairy, which I'm lactose intolerant at the time, had no idea. And I would probably put some sort of cereal on top. So it was either like Special K or it would be like a peanut butter crunch, like Captain Crunch peanut butter kind, whatever that kind, or it was Dino Bites with marshmallows. Again, it was like maybe 2 tablespoons because I knew, okay, that's like maybe 30 calories of cereal that I would put on my 90 calorie Greek yogurt. And then I would have some fruit on the side and that would be my lunch. And then my supper, my mom would bring me. My mom has always been so good at making balanced meals. And because I was living at home, like she did a great job of that. So I ate like a normal supper, but then I wouldn't really eat anything after that. And it wasn't to the point where it looked bad. Like I don't feel like from an external point of view, anybody would have maybe noticed like she's very much under eating. But then I started tracking. So I knew I was eating under 1,200 calories a day. And that was always my goal. I wanted to be under 1,200 calories. For context, our bodies need over 2,000 calories to honestly function at the ability that it needs to be functioning. Even if we think about our metabolism, if you restrict your calorie intake to be that low, your metabolism is not going to be very efficient. It goes into that state of stress and it's like holding on to everything because you don't know when you're getting food again. But for me, even if my body was holding on to it and then using, honestly, about 2,000 calories to actually function, and our body naturally burns about that amount depending on obviously your size, your gender, and your genes. Some people are different genetically, but if I was undernourishing, like my body could store some of that as fat, but I was still losing weight. And so that whole summer, I put so much of an emphasis on that. I did the Chloe Ting workouts, and that was like a 20-minute hit workout guaranteed to give you 6-pack abs. I would do her ab burner and her full body hit. Same workout I think every single day. I made it a goal to work out like about 7 days a week. And that's the difference though in my story is as I got more into health, it was an hour plus a day, every single day of the week, because I was so worried that I wouldn't keep losing weight versus when I was doing the Chloe Ting workouts, it was like 25 minutes a day. So like if we think about, doing that or going out for a walk, like it wasn't like it was a long workout. I was just doing it because I wanted to build that habit. I wanted to be consistent. So with food and exercise, I then went into my sophomore year of college, and I think I had lost probably about 10 to 12 pounds that summer. And then continued kind of living a similar lifestyle, but very, very aware of what I was eating that sophomore year of college. And I was living in a sorority house. The food was terrible, obviously contained so much dairy. I felt terrible. That summer, I also had to do a stool test, which this is TMI, but I'm going to share it because it's a piece, because I thought that there was something seriously wrong with my digestive system. Like, I felt so sick. I had upset stomach, and then what can follow that. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but with that, like, I felt ill. And so I finally went to the doctor, and I then later kind of self-diagnosed, like, well, yeah, Bailey, everything low calorie you were eating was a dairy product. And now you're lactose intolerant, and you probably have been for your entire life, and you just didn't recognize that. Like, now thinking of how aware I am of my body and how my body feels, I can't fathom being so disconnected that I don't understand that I'm intolerant to one specific food that I'm consuming every single day. My probiotic also contained dairy. So it's like I was doing so much of that because that was the low calorie option. Anyway, side note to that, but that's when then sophomore year of college, very aware of food. And then that summer we got sent home because of COVID, and I was living at home. I remember at this point, I was actually, honestly, my relationship with food was not bad at this point. My mom had gone through, she had surgery to remove cancer from her colon. And that is then when people would bring food to our house. And so we had meals that were in the freezer. Like, we couldn't even shut our freezer because we had so many meals. It was just the coolest thing. A shitty situation, but the coolest outcome to have that amount of generosity. But with that, then, like, I felt like I was very responsible for feeding my family, right? I was living at home with my parents and my brother, and with my mom's situation, like, I feel like I took on some responsibilities that I didn't always have. So I was making a lot of the meals, I felt like, or maybe at least preparing them. And I was spending a lot of time just exercising and eating, honestly, whatever. Like, my relationship with food wasn't bad. But then I went and I started living with 3 other girls, but that was when things kind of took a turn for the worse, because I was so into nutrition, I was so into exercise, but it started to get to the point where it was an hour and a half almost of working out every single day. I would go for an hour-long walk almost every single day with my dog, and then I completely avoided all carbs. So yes, I was still tracking my food. I did that for 2 years, but I felt like I was at a spot where I wasn't just eating food to stay alive like it had always been in the past, but I was eating food to look a certain way. And so that to me meant eating very, very little or avoiding complete areas of food. So I avoided carbs, like starchy carbs. So I avoided breads. I avoided pastas. I tracked my food. And then that's when I lost about 15 plus pounds. And that is when I think I don't feel like, and I struggle with the body dysmorphia. So when I look in a mirror, like, I don't feel like I looked too skinny, right? But I remember hearing comments like, wow, you've gotten really thin. And people always compliment you when you look thin. And I think that is something that I have had a hard time with, especially now as I've been about the exact same size for the last 2 years. Like, nobody comments about my appearance anymore. And so for me, it's like, well, then have I gotten really large and I just don't know it? And I'm not saying that any of that is bad. I'm not saying gaining weight is bad. I'm not saying if you've gained weight that is a bad thing, because I think that's just not true. But for me, again, as I think about my journey, I become very self-conscious because I truly don't feel like I know what I look like. And I think that's the hard part. Even, the peaks and the valleys, right? Me losing a ton of weight, I still didn't know what I looked like. My roommates were like, yeah, we could, like, now thinking back, they're like, yeah, well, we could tell something was wrong, but like, it's kind of a hard conversation to bring up, which I 100% agree. I finally then opened up about my disordered eating habits and over exercising habits to one of my closest friends growing up. That was also my roommate at that time. And that was the first person I really ever told. And then that following summer, I actually got engaged. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Then I got engaged and then I got married in August, but I lived at home and I just remember freaking out if I didn't have control over my food. Like honestly, like tearing up, wanting to cry if I knew my mom was making something that would contain pasta because I couldn't have pasta. And I really used that being lactose intolerant, which is what I discovered. And I honestly think is a huge piece of why I lost weight because I didn't know what to eat. And I also was able to be picky about my food in a way that was for my health, quote, right? It wasn't me doing it necessarily because, oh, it was for my health and I would feel way better. I think at that point in time, it was more so I have an excuse to have control over my food. I have an excuse to tell people I can't eat something, even if it was something I could eat, I just chose not to because I didn't want to have the calories. And so when I identified that lactose intolerance, I think that's when a majority of that weight did come off. And also I wasn't bloated. Like I finally physically felt pretty good. I didn't have any energy. My hair was falling out because I wasn't eating carbs. And I was chronically stressed. My cortisol was so out of whack. But at the same time, I physically, like my gut wise, digestive wise, like I didn't feel bad. And so that's when I could use that lactose intolerance as my excuse to have as much control over my food as possible. And I just know when I didn't have control over my food, like I would really want to break down. And it was really hard for me to not have that control. And there's this moment, and I remember being in the car with my dad and my mom and my brother, and my mom was talking about what we were having for supper. I can remember exactly where we were. It won't be of any relevance to you listening, but I remember exactly where we were. I think we were coming back from my grandpa's pond, which is where we would spend some evenings in the summer. And my mom was saying what she was making. And I was like, I can't have that. And they're like, well, why can't you have that? I'm like, I just can't eat that. Like, I'm not eating that. I'm not eating that. And I was so adamant about it. And my parents, not knowing obviously how to respond to that, they're like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you so much for saying there's something wrong with me. Like I got so defensive, right? And they're just like genuinely concerned, but I didn't want to talk about it. And I just remember like starting to cry, and my brother like looked over at me like, what the heck is wrong with you? And I was crying, and I'm like, I just struggle with food and I just have to have control over everything I eat. And I know it's not normal, but I can't help it. Anyway, but that whole moment happened, and my brother was just like, I think kind of in shock. And honestly, I should ask him if he even remembers that moment, because to me, again, all these little moments were so significant to me. And I think that's where it makes it hard for other people to identify, like, I didn't even know there was a problem with you. I didn't even know there was something wrong. Because to other people, they just see what they see. But I don't think, and I know this, like we as people don't always notice all the little comments or all the little things that maybe we say that really impact somebody or sticks with somebody, good and bad, right? There's so many good things about that, but also so many little moments where it's like hard as a friend to identify that there's a problem when on the outside you think everything's fine and dandy with your friend or with your parents, but then you don't actually know, and maybe you don't pay attention to all the little things that are actually really big things to them. So anyway, that was just a significant moment where I was like, okay, I finally admitted it to my parents. They know that I struggle. And honestly, I think they did the absolute best they could. No parent is prepared to know how to handle that. And it was never to the point where I was like, I need to go, get help with this. Like, I just didn't ever feel like I was at that point, which maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I know there's different tests you can do to see psychologically, or like a mental health therapist to see if that's something that you need. For me, I just didn't want to go there. I wanted to take care of it on my own. I didn't think that I needed somebody. But I'm kind of going on with obviously sharing all of this because it ties so closely into diet culture and the things that I hear. And so obviously now I feel like I've healed from that, but it doesn't mean that I don't see how much pain and hurt and frustration other people are experiencing because they have yet to mend that relationship with food. I shared this whole story because I want you to know mentally where I was, and know that now, and I'll talk about this a little later on, but now I'm doing really good. Honestly, I'm doing really, really good. And there's so many factors that play into that. But it doesn't mean I honestly don't get triggered, because I think I do. And I think this is why it pisses me off so much when I hear people talk poorly about their bodies, or when I hear them talk negatively about food so loud, because who knows what first grader is listening to them say that comment or make that comment about their body, and then looking at their own body and thinking, well, I'm a lot bigger than her. How in the world does she think that about herself? So many times I could tell you, I would listen to somebody say, oh my gosh, I'm just so fat. And I would look at the size of our clothes, and I wore clothes that were bigger than them. I would look in the mirror side by side, and I was bigger than them. So then I'm like, well, what do they think of me? If I'm bigger than them and they're talking so poorly about themselves, like, what do they think of me? And so that's where it just really irks me, I think, to hear these comments, especially like the one that I had just said of, well, I need to be on the Crumbit bike while I eat this bread, because obviously she was implying that she's going to get so fat if she eats this bread. Or I work at a coffee shop, and so many people come in and get sugar-free syrups, and it's always the people that have the most negative relationship with food. And I shouldn't generally make that statement. But for the most part, I know it's women because I've worked with them, or I've talked to them about their relationship with food, or I've seen them or heard them talk negatively about food, that get the sugar-free syrup. Or they say, well, give me sugar-free syrup, but I'm fine with whole milk because I got the sugar-free syrup. Like they feel this need to justify to even the person taking their order what they're ordering, because why? Like, why do we feel the need to justify some things? And that's something that I think my husband has really helped me out with a lot, is not having to justify why I'm eating. And I still catch myself doing it, but he calls me out. Like, I'll say, well, I'm just so hungry, like after supper. I'm just still so hungry because I worked out X amount of times today because I lead exercise classes. And then I went for a walk, and he's like, you don't have to justify it. You can just eat. And in my mind, I'm like, but I do need to justify it, because I don't want you to think like that I shouldn't be eating, or for you to judge what I'm eating. And he never ever does. That's the thing. The people around you are 99% of the time not judging what you're eating. And if they are, they have no right to do that. And you should not feel guilt about what you're eating because of what maybe somebody else is thinking. And that goes back to me just hating to eat in front of people. Like, I still don't love to eat in front of people, but now I post videos on the internet of me taking a bite from something I made for a recipe video. Like, all of those little things are gradually healing. And for me, it's been a very long journey. And I think it's been obviously not the easiest journey. And if you're somebody who is still struggling on this journey, I don't want to in any way brag like, oh, well, so many things are great for me, right? Like, it's easy. Just do this, do what I did. Because it's not true, right? Your journey is going to look so much different than my journey. Maybe you've never struggled with your relationship with food. And for that, like, that's awesome. Like, I'm so happy that it never has been. But for way too many people, it has. And that's where diet culture absolutely drives me crazy, because it puts you in this state of restriction. You restrict calories, you restrict certain categories of food. For me, it was carbs, starchy carbs, but you also miss out on so much, right? Think about going to a birthday party and refusing to have the birthday cake because you're on a diet. Like, mentally, you are going to be so upset with yourself and probably go home and binge eat or overeat on something that maybe wasn't the best option because you feel frustration for not being able to have the cake. Or you miss out on socializing with people. Like, if your friends are going out for frozen yogurt or ice cream and you're like, no, I can't go because you're on a diet and you don't have the control to not get something, you're missing out on that socialization, which again is nourishing to the mind and the spirit. But you're not nourishing your body because you are fearful of foods, or you are so stuck to eating a certain amount of calories that you don't go out and do things. You are also put in a state of confusion. People that preach to you to diet or have all these different diets, they want you to think that it is all inclusive. They want you to think that everything that they provide is so nourishing and you're going to be so satisfied with a boxed, prepackaged powder meal that you just warm up like Nutrisystem. Like, they want you to think that, look at all this pizza you can eat on Nutrisystem, when like you actually get all of those packaged meals that they have you eating and they look like total turd. I remember my cousin did something like that before her wedding, and she got a whole box of all this food, and it was like, I always think of like astronaut food, where like you add water and it just poof, there you've got a piece of pizza. Like, it was disgusting. And when you think about that, it's like, what am I doing that for? Why has it been instilled within me that it has to be so confusing and so overwhelming to just eat food? Like, and again, it goes back to eating to nourish your body versus eating to stay alive. My goal with everyone that I talk to, with every client that I work with, is that you no longer just eat to stay alive, but you eat to truly nourish your body. That means your body, mind, and spirit. You're nourishing all three. And so that's when we look at food, we no longer think, well, low carb is the diet that's going to work for me. Well, keto is going to be the diet that works for me. The only reason that I say eating a low carb, meaning breads and pastas, diet works is because you're removing a complete area of food. So if we think about, you go out to a restaurant and they bring out a bread basket and you don't have a piece of bread because you're on a low carb diet. It is not because you're not eating the bread that you've lost weight. It's because you're not eating that carb, that amount of calories in general. It's not breads that are evil. It's excess calories that can cause you to gain weight, right? Versus if you don't eat the bread, well, you've just saved yourself 200 calories that all kind of adds up. But it's because it's a complete area. It's not the carb. It is not the product in itself. And I don't ever promote that, because you need carbs to have energy. You need carbs to have a full functioning brain and body. That's why I lost my hair. I wasn't eating healthy fats and I wasn't eating carbs. At that time, I didn't think there was a healthy fat. I thought fat was fat. And so my hair fell out. And I was like, why am I losing so much hair? Well, yeah, Bailey, because you're not eating what you need to. You're removing a whole area of food, and that area of food was created by God, by God's people, for you to nourish your body. And when we think about not eating a diet, and that's why I don't call it an anti-inflammatory diet, which is what I do. It's not an anti-inflammatory diet. It's an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. Okay? Because I'm not dieting. It is not diet culture. It is diet in the sense of like, these are the foods that you fill your plate with to nourish your body. But I don't even like using that word because there's so much grossness surrounding diets. And so then if we kind of think about the keto diet, yeah, for some people, maybe it works. If I go to the grocery store and look for keto products, the ingredients are absolute turd in most of them. Absolute turd. If you're lactose intolerant, you can't really do keto if you're going to buy prepackaged food because it all contains a whey protein. Well, whey protein contains lactose, gonna mess with your gut. Like, it is not just like keto, boom, weight loss. It's like, well, what if I do keto and then I feel bloated and uncomfortable? What's wrong with keto? What's going on there? It's like that diet, and I guess in addition to that too, so many people fail to actually get to ketosis, which is what they say is that phase of the keto diet where you just like shred off weight. I have seen way too many women try keto and I shouldn't say fail, but in a sense, their body never got into ketosis. So yeah, they were eating a poop ton of protein, which is great, right? Eating a good amount of protein, but they weren't having any carbs. They weren't having any sugar. They were limiting their vegetables. They were limiting their fats. And in return, their body and their metabolism totally tanked because they weren't eating all of the core four that I talk about. Okay, so we look at that. We look at sugar-free and fat-free foods, which diet culture praises. Okay, well, if we look at sugar-free foods, there's sugar alcohols in sugar-free foods that are actually way more addictive than any white sugar could be. So maybe you're eating something that's lower in calories, but you are not going to be satisfied with just one serving because they've carefully crafted that food to be one that you want to go to over and over and over again. Okay, then you look at fat-free. I learned this from a professor in college, actually. And she was like, every time you buy something fat-free, I want you to just ask yourself, like, well, then what are they filling that product with that isn't fat? probably a lot more funky than the fat that would be in the product originally, right? Because she's like, they can't just, like with the compound of the food, they can't just completely take something out and not replace it, because the product in itself would not be the same product. So they have to add in a filler. Well, then you start thinking, well, what is in that then? You know, it's not like they just took out all the fat. And so that's where like all of these things that we've been taught, sugar-free diet, eating no sugar is the way to just have ultimate success. It's not. Like, and I guess that's also why I shared my story, is because it's not that I enter all of this without empathy. It's not like I've never been through this and that I'm saying all of these things and judging you for doing all these different diets, because that is 100% not what I'm doing. I'm showing you the whole process of my journey because I have tried it. I remember when I would go to Scooters and I would get a sugar-free cold brew. No milk or anything in it. It was a sugar-free vanilla cold brew. That was disgusting. If I went back and ate that, I would be repulsed, honestly. But at the time, I convinced myself, oh, this tastes so good, because I know it's only 5 calories and it tastes so good. So it's only 5 calories that I can track in my fitness tracker. And then, oh my gosh, for supper, I could have 500 to 600 calories, or I could have a 200 calorie supper. And then I just saved 500 calories today that I'm going to lose in weight. Awesome. That was how my mind worked. And that is why I tell you, there is no one diet that is, in the sense of diet culture, that is 100% going to work for you and not against you. And that's not to say you might lose weight, right? But you haven't learned how to nourish your body properly. You might lose weight, but you're also really struggling mentally because you don't enjoy anything anymore. You might lose weight, but the health of your gut microbiome is so bad that it's causing you to be anxious and depressed, which is 100% the reality that people don't realize. What is it? 60% of your serotonin? 60 to 90%? I'll double check my stat there. I know it's in that range of the serotonin in your body is produced in your gut. So if you have terrible gut health, if you're bloated and constipated and uncomfortable, your mindset, and that's why mental health therapists are now looking at the gut, your mindset is going to struggle because your body physically is unable to be happy. And all of those things that we just aren't taught, right? We aren't taught all of those little things that actually make a huge difference. So I think when we think about dieting, we need to think about eating whole food, from the earth food, made by God in its truest sense food, and nourish our body with that. And in that, not letting it be so restrictive that it runs your life, because that is the very opposite of restriction, that is the very opposite of what I'm trying to kind of preach, I guess, is that eating whole foods then needs to feel restrictive, because I am honestly the most free with food than I've ever been in my entire life. Huge props to sourdough for being the one thing that truly healed my relationship with carbs and bread. But it doesn't mean that I don't eat things that maybe aren't the most healthy for me, right? But how you go about eating that food makes all the difference. And that's something that I work on so much so in the one-on-one work that I do, when I talk to clients. Even if you messaged me and you're like, I have this issue, I would love to work through that with you. And this isn't me selling anything. This is me just telling you it does not need to feel as frustrating and overwhelming and confusing and restrictive as it historically has. And if I would have learned that so much earlier on in life, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, which is something that I'm truly so passionate about. But secondly, I would have saved myself so much suffering, so much restriction, so much fear of food. I would have saved myself from having disordered eating habits. I maybe even would have saved myself from struggling so much with the body dysmorphia side of things in college, right? If I would have just understood these things. And so I really just want you to know that diet culture does not need to run your life. And hopefully if you're here and you're listening, I'm probably preaching to the choir. You might know this all already, but just know like there is a whole different realm of health called holistic health that truly heals your entire body. And I know everybody that has a diet, quote, is so passionate about it, and they could sound equally as passionate, if not more, than I am right now. But I'm not trying to sell you anything. And I hope that helps you take everything with much more depth. Is I'm not selling you now like, well, hey, go buy my food program. Go buy my recipe guide. I don't even advertise that. Like things that maybe I sell a recipe guide, but it's not like you need to eat exactly like that to be healthy. Or I'm not selling packaged food or a food product, or I'm not like, I am sharing this because I'm passionate about it. And there's avenues that I help women, but it's never stemmed in me wanting to gain something from you working with me. I genuinely want to help. And that's why I do a lot of free stuff. Hopefully you follow me over on Instagram. I share a lot of free recipes, a lot of free like not even advice, but just things that I've learned, lessons that I've learned. That's why I share on a podcast every single week, 100% free. I get paid for none of it. Like I have all these avenues to help in a way that doesn't cost money for you to start giving a crap, honestly. And that's not to say you don't take that the wrong way. You 100% could care so much about your body and your mind and your spirit, but maybe there's just other things that you're struggling with outside of food. And again, with that, like, take time for yourself. Take time to dive into that. Take time to identify the root cause of that. Because until you do that, I think it's really hard to find healing. So hopefully you can relate to something I've talked about today. Been all over the place. I get very passionate about diet culture. I just continue to hear all of these people that know nothing about nutrition preach to somebody about how much this low carb diet helped them. And I honestly, my heart just really, really hurts for so many women who struggle with that and who fall into the trap of doing a diet because it worked for their friend and then not finding success in that diet because our bodies are so unique and different. And one thing is not going to work perfectly for the next person unless it was truly like an organic thing. I don't think specific diets are cut out for everyone or anyone. Not to say there aren't ways that you can maybe see results from them, but to find internal healing, like I've been saying 100 times, like I truly just don't think there's a diet that can do that. So hopefully food for thought. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so thankful for you. You stuck around again for an hour and 2 minutes, which here I was rambling. Me saying, okay, this isn't going to be long, and then I ramble forever is a joke at this point because sometimes I just get on a roll and I can't stop. But know that you are so valued. Know that you are so loved. Know that you don't have to struggle alone. You don't have to suffer through what you're suffering through alone. And that it's okay to take time to slow down and sit with yourself and identify what you want, what you need to see changes in, where things are coming from, where feelings are coming from, where those negative beliefs are coming from, and to flip them so they're positive and to repeat that to yourself so many times that you truly believe it. I'm going to be doing that because I need it just as much as you might, and I can't wait to hear from you. Please never hesitate to connect with me, and I'll talk to you again next month. Bye.